Colors. Halt. Preset. Pause. Port. Pause. Colors. Colors turn. March. Colors. Halt. Dismiss.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Thank you, Tinker Honor Guard. At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce Lieutenant General Litchfield.
Thank you, Brad. So Brad gave me one job today, and that was to say post the colors, so I'm done. Except for what we're all here to do today. So thank you for coming and celebrating this special day. And Patrick, thank you for the honor. Patrick and I have a special bond together, and that is that he got to be an exec through, I think, one of the biggest transitions that has happened at Tinker, at least since it stood up, and that was the standing up of AFSC. And he learned to be an executive officer, and I learned to be the commander of AFSC. And I will tell you, neither one of us knew what we were doing as we entered into it. But we got through it. And so we have stories to tell and a celebration to be had. But like all celebrations, they're not about the military career. They're about the adventure that takes place, and the adventure happens to be with the family as well as the Air Force. So Genevieve, thank you very much for being here, and congratulations on your great career. Nate, thanks for being here, and I know Simon would be here, but as Patrick said, life happens, and we all understand that. And Amanda, thank you for coming all the way from West Virginia via California to Oklahoma for this event, so it's great. I will tell you that Patrick and I earlier were talking about, he said, I've done so many retirements that he goes, I didn't think that it would be mine coming up pretty soon, but I have to tell you, eventually we go through it. And I will say this, I now have a good perspective of what it's like to do a retirement from the retirement side. So when you say those words, next chapter in life and moving on, it's really true, and it's pretty good. It's pretty good. So don't worry about it, Patrick. Life is good on the other side, and life continues to be good. So you've got a lot to be thankful for in terms of your career, but also what you have ahead of you and what you get to look forward to. Because the one thing that I tell folks is that you never realize how heavy that backpack is until you get to take it off, and then it's really kind of liberating, and it's fun. So this is your day, and then you get to go into the next chapter and do the life's transition. And Linda and I got to share the career together, just like you and Genevieve, and so now you get to do the next chapter together, and you get to reset, life's reset, and that's pretty good. today's been a great day for me. We left Fort Worth this morning in the midst of a big old thunderstorm, and then about a half hour into the trip, I got to talk to Patrick, and I knew that Jen was in the background because Jen was telling him what to tell me. So if there was any question as to the success, where the success of Patrick came from, it had a lot to do with his telephone call. Because Patrick, say this, Patrick, do this. Patrick dutifully did, and it worked out really well. But what I didn't realize was the history that they shared together. And it starts in West Virginia. And it starts somewhere between the junior and senior year of high school on the basketball court. And that is where Jen beat Patrick in horse. And that
He was
all.
too afraid to play me again, don't you?
If I think she's undefeated. I don't know if we could take a vote here, but she's undefeated. But anyhow, that's where it all began, in West Virginia in high school, and then through fits and starts, eventually joining the Air Force, and Patrick enlisted and went out to Edwards Air Force Base, and spent 10 years out at Edwards. And that's where, you know, if you're a young enlisted member, just married, Edwards is either a really good place to be or not so good place to be, because there's not a lot of things to do.
Except have babies, right?
There's all kinds of things that you can do out there. And having babies is one of them. But you know, you got to make the good best out of every assignment. Sure. But at Edwards, what I really was impressed with was what Patrick said about what happened about 6 years into his tour. He was a data analyst working in the Edwards flight test area, and then signed up to be an ALS instructor. So you get selected to be an ALS instructor, and I think every one of us would say there's no probably more important job than the instructors of ALS in molding what I would consider the NCOs and the backbone of our Air Force. But for Patrick, it was more than that. It was really the understanding that he actually can do more than he thought he could. And he could apply himself in ways that he could lead. And that, you know, through some dedication and determination, he could walk the talk of what he was asking for those folks that were growing up after him to come do, and able to take classes, get his degree, and then maybe there was more that he could get out of the Air Force. And so he finished up his 4-year tour at ALS, went down then to San Antonio, working at AETC at Randolph as a command, a command manager, and then finished up his degree, and then he had to make the decision that I know in my career I've always had the trouble having that conversation with someone that says, you know, I may want to go be an officer. And you're sitting looking at this at that point in time, a tech sergeant going, now he's a future chief or an officer, and we need them both. And it's really what you want to do it. And he took the role and signed up for OTS, got selected, and then became a distinguished graduate out of OTS and commissioned and sent off to Lakenheath. Now, interestingly enough, he goes to Lakenheath as an information manager, kind of in the comm world over there. And you look at Patrick, and there's probably some things that should scare you about thinking about him controlling our computers and doing the ability for InfoSec and all that kind of stuff. That's really not his forte. But he mastered it. He did so well at it that he got selected to be the executive officer for the maintenance group commander over at Lakenheath. So as a maintenance group commander, he kind of said, hey, I like my time on the flight line, and the maintenance commander did what every good maintenance commander should do, and that's get him to become a maintenance officer. So from Lake and Heath, he goes off to Grand Forks, goes through AMOC, gets his maintenance credentials, and becomes a Grand Forks maintenance officer. And the great thing about it is, if you read his resume or you read his OERs all the way through there, it's the classic, right? He goes into the fab shop because you don't want him to screw anything up, at least not on the flight line. He masters that quickly, number one, all the way up through Grand Forks, finally graduating Grand Forks. And by the time he's through, he's the Leo Marquez winner. He's the PPOI, the Professional Provider of the Year winner for the officer, and the CGO of the Year for Grand Forks. So not a bad track record. And then from there, he gets picked up for the career broadening program, comes to Tinker, and he does first year of career broadening, and then he gets hooked up. We were looking for someone to help be the action officer for standing up what's now the Air Force Sustainment Center. And so I don't recall this happening this way, but Patrick said first time he knew about it was the day before we had our first summit here. And what we did at that point in time was it was almost almost a year and a half before the center stood up. We brought everybody together from across Air Force Materiel Command and the Pentagon. And what we did was we brought them in to do a workshop and said, if we were going to stand up AFSC, how should we do it? What do we want it to be? And how should it operate? And Patrick was sitting in the room that day, and I will tell you, it was chaos. It was chaos because one, no one liked it. It was change. It was a different way of doing business, and we had everybody all over the map. And so Patrick then cut his teeth about what I would call the art of team building, and being able to take a team and pull it together and able to organize in something that you are actually going to have to execute. So through that time as an action officer standing up AFSC, then he became my executive officer in the May time frame when we were still at that time Oklahoma Air Logistics Center, and just prior to the stand-up, but got a chance to go through the stand-up time frame. And I'll never forget the stand-up of AFSC. It was the biggest ceremony I think we had here because we had to bring in everybody from all across the AFMC. We had senators, we had congressmen here, we had all the dignitaries from Robbins and Hill and of course Oklahoma City. And we did this a ceremony in a brand new hangar that no one had occupied before. We had never done a ceremony in the hangar in this brand new one before. And so no one knew what it was like, and no one knew what it was operated on. And so there was kind of chaos, right? There was, how do you do it? How are you going to make this happen? And I decided that the one place I didn't want to be during this whole time was here, so I went on leave. And it was over the 4th of July weekend, and I went on leave the whole week. The ceremony was on Wednesday. I came back on Monday. That's how you do. That's how you become a 3-star, right? Don't stay around for all the mess. Just show up at the end. And we had an absolutely flawless ceremony, and I know Kelly's in the room and all protocol. And all I could remember before I was going on leave is at that time Lisa telling me, "Don't get hurt," and because I was going water skiing, and guess what? I got hurt. And I barely could walk when I got back, but I didn't let anybody know that. But anyhow, we had a great ceremony, and then went through the first year. And Patrick was the executive officer, and he learned an awful lot about what I would call taking care of the team, and not only taking care of what I had to do, but also learning and growing and building the entire organization. And I think that in that year, I watched an officer grow in an immense way and turn in from what I would call a tactician to someone who could handle the strategic understanding of what needed to be done and then take that strategy and go out and execute it. So at that point in time, Nate, I think you were about ready to go in to figure out what you wanted to do next, and your dad said, if I could leave him here another year, that would be good, so he volunteered to deploy. And when I look at that, not only was he doing what was right for the Air Force, but he was also doing what was right for the family. And it was a pretty special time, and I think, Dave, he ended up going under your command out in Al Dhafra. And when you read it, what you wrote about him out there, all I could say is, at the end of it, it was he understood what it took to keep him flying and generate air power in a combat environment. And you took very good care of him from there. And I think your boss was Rene Leon. And I know both. And I will tell you this, Patrick, if you impressed both Dave and Rene, that's a pretty impressive operation you did. Then he goes on to Naval War College, gets picked up Lieutenant Colonel below the zone, and then from there goes on to McConnell Air Force Base as a squadron commander, knocks it out of the park as a squadron commander, but then also has what I would consider the defining moment of what you would consider an officer, a person, a family man, and a human being, as he gets the news that he's stricken with cancer, was able to execute his command and fight what you would have to say is literally a fight for your life. And so when you go through that and you're able to exceed and excel as a commander and come out of it in flying colors, that's a pretty good day. That's a pretty good day. So what do you take away from it, and what do you look at all of it? First, I look at Patrick, and I look the way he lives his life, and I go, that's not a bad model for anybody to follow. Right? How do you balance priorities of family? How do you balance priorities of your nation? How do you balance priorities of what you have to do, both in terms of the good, which is what you really like to do, pat people on the back and help them, but also what you have to do as a commander and as a leader. You have to sometimes deal with those things that aren't quite so pleasant, but you can do it with respect, and you can do it with dignity, and at the end of the day, you can make sure you're doing the right thing for those that work for you. There's also another thing about Patrick that I really admire, and it's kind of something I admire in all leaders. Whatever expression you want to use, still water runs deep, or you can say he gets it done without breaking glass. There are some leaders that that are it's like going, they leave huge wakes, and everybody around them gets thrown around and thrown about and tossed around. And yeah, they make progress forward, but everything else gets topsy-turvy. Patrick doesn't. Patrick just makes it happen, and he does it in a way that everybody feels good about having been associated with him and having been around him, and even having to do those things that they may not want to do, but they know it's the right thing to do. And Patrick allows that people to succeed and grow. And then I think that if you talk to Patrick now and you talk to him about what's important, at the end of the day, you got to take some time to really understand the good that's around you. You got to make sure that you understand that when it's all said and done, it's about family, and it's about friends, and it's about those that are around you. And so when I look at it here today, Patrick, I know why you wanted to have your ceremony here, so that the people that really meant the most of you could be here. And so if you're in this room today, I think you got to feel very special that you are in Patrick's inner circle, and you're in that circle because he believes your friends are family and that you're special to him. And so I just want to say thank you for being a great role model for us as an officer, as a leader, and as someone we can look up to say, I want to live my life just like you. Now, as Patrick transitions, it's really kind of cool. He's now a professor. And I've seen the picture. He's got the goatee going, he's got the hair over the ears growing, he's got the mustache. He's got it all. He's got it all. And he's down in San Antonio. So when I asked Genevieve, what do you do for fun down there? You know what she told me? They go to wine bars. What a professorial thing to do, right? I mean, you kick back, you get your wine, you're kind of sitting there going, all right, well, that term paper, it wasn't so good before I started my wine, but it's looking a little better now. And if you're a student and you buy them a glass, you might even get a better grade on there. So he's got it going. But I know that as he's looking at his options, what I would say is the term that I used is a life's reset, and you get a chance to do that. So now down in San Antonio, the world is yours. You can do what you want with it. You can go as far or as little and have as much fun as you want. And of course, I know family will be a big part of what you've all done. So Patrick, on behalf of the United States Air Force, and on behalf of everybody who knows us, thank you very much for what you've done and how you served. Thank you for what you've done in terms of bringing up the next generation of airmen that's going to be able to take our Air Force to heights that you and I could only dream or imagine of. And thank you for what you're going to do for our nation even after you're in your next chapter of life, because you're not done making great things happen. So if you would honor me, Patrick, I would like a last salute, if we could, while you're in uniform.